Armenia says it's willing to return several villages it's controlled since the 1990s to Azerbaijan. It's been hailed as a historic step towards achieving lasting peace between two arch rivals, but it's not pleasing everyone. The enclaves are mostly uninhabited and only a few people will be directly affected, but local Armenians who live close to the border are angry and worried they could be next. DW's Fanny Facsar reports from Tavush province in Northern Armenia, which is on the border with Azerbaijan.
Barbed wire along the edges of Tavush province here in Northern Armenia marks where this country ends and Azerbaijan begins, for now. Hanum Tamrazyan was born here. Life is hard. There are not enough jobs, but the land is fertile, she says. Her garden is her pride. She fears the new border demarcation could put her house officially in Azerbaijan, with the people many here dislike so much they call them Turks, an insult.
We are told that this road and bridge belong to Turks, but we're not giving them either.
The government has promised some form of compensation, she says, but that's not what she wants.
This is my Armenian land and I don't want to leave.
Armenia and Azerbaijan are neighbors with a bloody history. 2 wars and many conflicts in the past 3 decades. Armenia now wants to give these 4 former Azerbaijani villages back. They are uninhabited, but local geography and administrative borders mean several other nearby Armenian villages will be affected. The land in question is only a few square kilometers, but that's not the point for people living in this area. Armenians here are afraid losing patches of land in the name of peace. They say the new border will literally bring an old enemy, Azerbaijan, closer, and they're worried Azerbaijan will want more. Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan visited last month to tell locals like Hanum there was no other option.
The border is a certain guarantee of peace, but we must always remember that something may not go as planned. But if everything goes as we have planned, we should stay in a dialogue with each other.
Armenia is at crossroads. Prime Minister Pashinyan has been a strategic partner of Putin's Russia. But he's criticized Russia for recently failing to prevent its other ally, Azerbaijan, taking over Nagorno-Karabakh. Pashinyan has been looking for security guarantees with the West. How dangerous and effective will it be for Armenia to expand relations with Western powers to help keep the peace with Azerbaijan without creating a problem with Russia?
We don't have choice. In Armenia, for decades, it was a myth that Russia is a provider of security. It's not. So you should try to find it somewhere else. From Azerbaijani point of view, their goal is not peace. So the goal is to use peace agreement as an instrument, continuing to push on Armenia.
That's what many Armenians, even here in Yerevan, fear. Polls suggest the things that concern them the most are national security and border issues.
We don't want a war either. We all want peace. But with Azerbaijanis, it's impossible to negotiate peace.
In Tavush province, so close to the border, relics can still be found from hostilities in the 1990s.
The shell landed here, and here is the shrapnel. Here, here, and here.
Further fighting is seen as a real possibility. Liova Kostanyan is a veteran. He says he fears Armenia wouldn't get much help against their neighbors.
If there's peace, it will be good. We cannot fight the Turks. The whole world stands by them, supports them.
The new border could put their grandchildren's school right next to Azerbaijan.
We are afraid. We won't allow kids to go there. The young people will leave this village. Those who have small kids, all will leave.
This is an illegal process.
Opposition politicians made a trip from Armenia's capital, Yerevan, to these little villages near the border to support furious locals. They are worried land that they make a living on may be returned to Azerbaijan, and that their farms might end up on the front line of a future conflict.
And we can speak now with DW's Fanny Facsar, who filed that report. She joins us from Riga. Fanny, Armenia's prime minister says there's no alternative but to return land to Azerbaijan. Why is that?
And that's exactly what Armenia's Prime Minister Pashinyan said when visiting those very same villages that we have been to during the past couple of days in Tavush province, so close to the border with Azerbaijan. He made clear if those uninhabited enclaves are not being handed over, then basically Armenia is risking yet another war with its rival Azerbaijan on the other side of those barbed wires we've seen in the report. See, he basically makes clear there's no wiggle room. He has to deliver, Armenia has to deliver. And Azerbaijan, they made clear that this has to be a precondition in order to have some sort of a long-term peace between the two countries. Now, I think it's really important, however, to see this entire new border or new demarcation line to be set on between the two countries on some parts of Armenia in the bigger context of the war in Ukraine. Ever since Russia has become quite busy, obviously, in Ukraine, that means that in Armenia, they're leaving some sort of a void because Russia has been seen as a key partner to provide security for Armenia. Now, that picture and that sentiment definitely changed since last year, especially when Nagorno-Karabakh has been sort of basically not directly handed over by Armenia, but Azerbaijan took control of Nagorno-Karabakh without Russia protecting ethnic Armenians. That was the expectation from Armenia because they're part of a security alliance led by Russia. So that did not happen. So what does it mean for Armenia? They have the perspective now that they need to deliver, they need to hand over some land in order to avoid another war. Yes.
So this is about trying to establish peace, but the political geography of that region, as we're hearing, is hugely complex. Would a peace agreement, Fanny, with Azerbaijan guarantee peace for Armenia?
Ordinary citizens, but also politicians who oppose this plan will tell you that this will actually portray Armenia as a very weak country, because if you hand over land, that means that basically you won't be able to defend that land. So you will have a lot of skepticism from ordinary citizens, not just very close to the border with Azerbaijan, but even in the capital, as we have heard, in Yerevan. If you look at the bigger picture once again, Armenia is at crossroads because as it doesn't feel protected by Russia very much, even though as a former Soviet state and once again being part of this security alliance led by Russia, that was the myth for decades, in fact, that they will be protected by Russia. So now Prime Minister Pashinyan is using the word diversifying foreign politics, but also economy, meaning making sure that this country doesn't depend wholly on Russia when it comes to the energy sector, but also when it comes to the security factor here. But as I'm saying, and you just pointed out the geopolitical complexity of the region, of the neighbouring countries there, it's a very difficult place of maneuvering for Armenia, being a landlocked country, as small as Belgium, but really surrounded by major regional powers, Russia, Turkey, and then obviously the rival Azerbaijan towards the east. So it is going to be difficult, and people will tell you they do not believe that there's going to be long-term peace, even if those few square kilometers are going to be handed back to Azerbaijan.
In your report, we heard about the concerns of those locals living close to the border. Are they facing an uncertain future, Fanny?
The people we have been speaking to are really worried that it's not just about the fact that they will possibly have to leave their land, that their cows won't be able to graze, they won't be able to maintain their agriculture and basically their way of living, their income, but also they're worried they, in order to stay, possibly they would have to become Azerbaijani, and this is exactly what they do not want. It's a very emotional topic overall, and the question just really is what's going to happen to Armenia once the new demarcation line between Azerbaijan and Armenia is completed.
Fanny, thank you very much for your reporting, your analysis. Our correspondent, Fanny Facsar, there in Riga.
Let's get some analysis from Alyssa de Carbonell in London. She's the Deputy Director of the Europe and Central Asia Programme of the International Crisis Group. That's an independent organisation working for peace. Welcome, Alyssa, to DW. Can I ask you, can this agreement bring a lasting peace to two long-standing foes?
Well, Armenia and Azerbaijan have held several rounds of bilateral talks over the last couple of months, and the agreement to return these four abandoned villages that have been controlled by Armenia since the 1990s, as well as the beginning of border delimitation, is the latest sort of tangible sign that they can come to really difficult agreements. Both sides have a reason to want a peace deal. President Aliyev wants to cement gains over the last years, also to curry international favor ahead of Baku's hosting of the COP29 climate talks. And Pashinyan has made a number of unpopular concessions, as your report showed, and wants to deliver on his promise of peace to the people. He really believes this will bring more security. And just before this agreement to return the villages, Pashinyan had warned that war could start by the end of the week if Yerevan refused Baku's demands, which tells you a little bit about the imbalance of power in those negotiations.
OK, so you're saying that it is a positive for both. In our report, we heard Armenians there express fear that Azerbaijan may want more land in the future. Is that a realistic scenario, or do you think Azerbaijan is happy with the current outcome?
So, Baku is definitely happy with a lot of concessions from the Armenian side in the last months, and it's in a strong position at the moment. There remains a number of disagreements on claims to territory, notably on a transport corridor between Azerbaijan and its exclave in Nakhichevan. So, we're not there yet in terms of a peace agreement, and it's hard to say. But I think it's important to also say that any kind of peace deal we shouldn't expect too much from it. It's likely to be thin on details and more of a set of general principles. But after 30 decades of conflict, that's really quite significant. And the bilateral process of peace talks now between Yerevan and Baku is the only game in town. So if that doesn't work, it could really spell more trouble.
OK, but just to sort of get a sense of, the balance in all of this, it does seem that Armenia has been quite isolated in this conflict. Would you say that Moscow essentially turned its back on Yerevan, on Armenia's capital, in all of this? And if so, why?
So that's certainly how people in Yerevan feel about it. The political elite are incredibly angry and disappointed at Moscow. I was there in December, and it's very strong emotions. There's a number of reasons. Russia is really bogged down in Ukraine at the moment. They want to keep close relations with Azerbaijan. There have been tensions for months, before even Azerbaijan retook Nagorno-Karabakh in its military offensive this fall, between the Kremlin and Yerevan and Pashinyan's administration. So it's not a surprise, but we've seen most recently Russian peacekeepers pull out from Nagorno-Karabakh ahead of the end of their mandate, which is and they've never been popular with Baku. Baku has always wanted them out. So it's just a sign of where Russia sees its weight at the moment, and it's not with Yerevan.
All right, Alyssa de Carbonell from the International Crisis Group. We'll have to leave it there, but thanks so much for your analysis.
Thank you.